Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Moose Island Mischief, the Eastport Art Center podcast. I'm your host, Mark Macy, and I'll be taking you through the world of art down east. Today on the show, we have singer-songwriter Emma Page, author Penny Geisinger, and artist and writer Lora Whelan. Their songs, their readings, their interviews. It's a fun show, and actually it's our first, so we're really excited, and we hope that you enjoy listening. We're going to get into it, but before we do, let's take a quick break for the quote-unquote news.
This just in. Mrs. Everdene's daughter Jane, the wicked smart one who went to the state spelling bee that one time, was reportedly seen smooching that no-good Jimmy Kenendowski as they walked hand-in-hand down Main Street. Reports also indicate that Jimmy had that smug look on his face that makes you just want to take him down a peg or two. A local proprietor who wished to remain anonymous told reporters, quote, "I just can't stand that Jimmy Kenendowski. Who does he think he is?" The family has been notified, and Mrs. Everdene is en route to the hospital after collapsing from the news. Mr. Everdene was last seen muttering to himself and is presumed to be armed and dangerous. This has been Bob Oblong reporting.
This is Michelle Marianne Mitchell reporting live from Route 1 just outside of Perry, Maine, where a truck carrying hundreds of bottles of coffee brandy has turned over. Mainers from across the country have come rushing to the scene, which has erupted into a frenzied grab and go for this delicious Maine staple. Several impromptu bars have been set up alongside the road where people are adding the brandy to milk and drinking over ice. Loud chatter can be heard nearly a half a mile away, and at least one fight has broken out between a man in a Patriots jersey and a woman eyewitnesses report as his high school sweetheart. That's all from this reporter. I've got a bartender to wave down.
A somber day here at Big Willie's Eatery, where customers have just been informed the kitchen has run out of today's special. The chef has wiped it from the blackboard and murmurs in the dining room can still be heard. I've just spoken with the proprietor of the restaurant, Big Willie himself, who simply shrugged when questioned about why he hadn't ordered more scallops if he was going to be serving his famous maple bacon scallop roll as today's special. Many customers are beyond themselves, and I'm making out something here in the corner booth. Yes, it seems a Maine state trooper has come to tears. Again, a very solemn scene. This is Lucy Indaski reporting.
First, we'll hear from Emma Page. She'll sing some songs, and I'll ask her some questions. Emma is a singer-songwriter from Lubec, Maine. Her lifelong love of music led her to pursue a music education degree, and she's now an instructor at Maine Academy of Modern Music. She continues to perform around the state and draws inspiration from any and all styles of music, but especially folk, jazz, soul, and rock. So without further ado, here are the sounds of Emma Page.
Do you think everybody's asleep? You think everybody can hear me? Do you think I could finally speak to myself and feel fine out loud? Do you think my manners are good? Do I say what you need to hear when you need it, like questions that no kind of righteous answer belongs to? 'Cause I think I do, but I can't be sure, and I listen good, but just not to the words, and you know, 'cause of course you do. Of course you do. Explain it again, 'cause I wasn't listening. Go from the part where you said that I wasn't your girl. It's up in the clouds, but it's worth checking out. If you're young and you're able, your circuits are stable, you're king for a day, the forest of blood on your hand. If I were you, I'd give it up, I'd give it up, I'd give it up, all of my little tricks, I'd give it up, I'd give it up, I'd give it up, being the worst thing you kissed, I'd give it up, I swear I would. I wrote it on my wrist when I was drunk and I thought it was good. So if anyone can hear me, I'm in. 'Cause gets to talking of the wine. You think everybody's asleep? You think anybody can hear me? You think everybody's asleep? You think anybody can hear me? Do you think everybody's asleep? Do you think anybody can hear me? Do you think everybody's asleep? Do you think anybody can hear me?
Awesome. Can we get a title for that song?
The song's called Manners.
Manners. And we're here with Emma Page. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we'll just dive right in with some questions. I know that you grew up down east, and you said that you spent a lot of time alone, kind of in nature, in your imagination, and I'm wondering what effect that's had on you as a musician.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Big question, I think. Yeah, something about growing up down east as like an only child. Spent a lot of time on the beach and in like situations of like real quiet, like silence. And I think your brain just wants to fill that space if your brain is anything like mine. So I was always just like humming little songs to myself and making up little things in my head that just sort of filled that empty space that I feel like there happens to be, like on a beach all by yourself, you know?
Very groovy. I'm just wondering if you'll talk a little bit about Manners, kind of what that song is for you.
Oh yeah. I've always been like really fascinated with songs kind of with irregular forms, irregular structures. Like the Beatles song Happiness is a Warm Gun sort of comes to mind, where there's just like these 4 sections that are just unrelated wildly, but also just fit perfectly together. Not that, I could ever come anywhere close to something like that, but I actually wrote this song after I had a big fight with one of my best friends, and I was just like, I feel like a pure sort of conversion of like that angry energy, that like mad energy that kind of came out in this way that didn't have a lot of symmetry, and kind of changes the feel and the groove a couple times, just like navigating through the thoughts that you might have about a person that you love when you're really mad at them.
Yeah, a really cool kind of marriage of structure and content there. And exciting to get talking a little bit about your process, which we're going to do after this next song. Will you introduce that for us?
Sure. I do need to do a little one of these. Cool. So yeah, this next song is called True Good. It's a happy song. I think I was feeling pretty happy when I wrote it, but one of the biggest parts of my process, I guess, is just improvising, and this song came out of like a little session of that. So decent, halfway, good gracious, I never told you the good news. August is up and lifting its lashes. Go on, be warm, be joyful.
And that was True Good by Emma Page. We're going to switch it up a little bit this time, and I'd wonder if you talk about True Good just a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So, like I said, it's just kind of like I wrote that song a couple months ago, I think. Wait, how long ago was the summer? Longer than that. Just looked out the window and there's snow everywhere. Yeah, I wrote this song in the summer. Of course, I think everyone had a pretty weird summer, but I spent that weird summer with living with two of my best friends in the whole world, and we just kind of there were some times where we had like just no cares in the world, and this song is sort of like me wanting to like share that feeling with other people, me wanting to represent that feeling and bottle it up and give it away, especially since there's so much negativity. It's just like, why not try to be good, be happy. I don't know, that's maybe a too simplistic answer, but it's a happy song about being happy with your friends.
I think we could all use a dose of that. So thanks for bringing it to us. And just moving into, we talked a little bit about your process, but you've said a lot of your songwriting starts with improvisation. And I was wondering if you just kind of clue our listeners in on what that means and what your process looks like, kind of from start to finish.
Yeah, so it usually looks like me alone in my room, usually like egregiously late at night, and just putting on a recording device, my phone usually, just recording a little voice memo of me playing and then singing gibberish, and then the gibberish turns into words, and then the playing turns into music with structure. And once I get sort of halfway an idea of whether this is something or nothing, I'll usually put it into like GarageBand or something and sketch out some vocal harmonies or maybe some counter melodies in another instrument. So it's all about sketching like the rough shapes of things. And I think the most fantastic thing about improvising is that it gets you as close as possible to your brain, So no matter what, even if you're singing nonsense, it's like the closest thing to dreaming, I think, that you can do while you're awake. It's just like processing all the things that have happened to you that day or this year or in your entire life. And even if you're trying not to sing about yourself or your life, you're going to end up doing it. And so I think that's really like therapeutic for me. And I think it comes across in the songs that I wrote them like completely just off the cuff, I guess.
Yeah, there's something really direct and vulnerable about your songwriting that definitely comes through. So we gotta have one more song from Emma Page, and if you just intro this and then let us enjoy.
Sure. This next song is called Nowhere. It's not as cheerful, but it's just as much from the heart. Dancing with no music, feeling it made me forget that my socks were wet. Darling, friend, spare a cigarette. Are you in the weeds? Are you kicking yet? Can you believe it? Hey, porch light, tell me something bright. Why so all the time? Why so all the time I go back inside? Everyone who does it is a liar. Everything they touch becomes the light. You say, so sound it out, we're all together in our tiny little boat, going tiny little nowhere. Rest upon the words of some strange lover. I heard him say there's only so much world to go around. He promised things would come in threes. How about forests and trees? Legal ways to send the freeze along your spine. Hey, porch light, tell me something bright. Why so in my eyes? Why so in my eyes? I go back inside. And I talk like I forgot, so he reminds me I'm only as alive as I decide to be. Is it poison? Yeah, for sure, but we can laugh at things in our tiny little boat, going tiny little nowhere, giving up and starting over.
Fabulous. That was Nowhere by Emma Page. So just a few questions, Emma, before we let you go. One, I think you've done a great job of already answering with the songs that you've played for us today, but in hearing your voice for the first time on a different track, I was really struck by and wanting to put it into a box and saying, wow, that's really a jazz voice. But I know that's something that you would push back against, and that you would push back against for any voice. And I'm wondering if we had a discussion about this. I'm wondering if you would just talk a little bit about it, because it was a revelation for me.
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, which I guess is most people, I'm a voice teacher. I teach, kids how to sing and teenagers how to sing, but I'm also a voice student forever, kind of locked into that at this point. And I've had some really, really great voice teachers at USM, the college that I go to. Taylor O'Donnell, my voice teacher, kind of opened my mind to the concept that the human voice is just full of sounds, and it's kind of been this idea that's driven my teaching and my learning about singing, that the human voice is just capable of so much if you are willing to work at it. And that we all just contain the palette of colors. So you can sing more jazz sounding at times, but then you can also just change your technique a little bit, and then you sound like a classical singer. Or you can change your technique a little bit more, and then you'll sound like a pop singer. And so it really does depend what you're going for. And I think my personal philosophy is that I want to sound like me, but I can sound like a lot of different things, if that makes sense. And to deliver the message of the song that I'm trying to deliver is going to take sort of different colors from the palette of the human voice. So
yeah, it really brings up a lot of questions about identity and this physical thing that is a voice. I'm glad that you brought up that you're a music educator. And I wanted to ask you, how do you see yourself as a musician and a music educator in dialogue, or are those distinct roles for you, or do they interplay, or how do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I would say there's a level of imposter syndrome at the heart of both roles. Kind of feeling like I'm just like a kid. Like, how am I supposed to really depend on myself as an authority of myself to either express music or to teach music. So that's something that's a nobody tells you how much of a battle that is. So I try not to take myself too seriously, I guess, to sort of counteract that. But I learn from my students all the time. So I think that it definitely, there's so much interplay between those two things, being a musician and being a music educator. You can't really be one without being the other in some way. So yeah, I think my goal is not to like directly transmit information about music to kids or to anyone else, but rather to just widen the circle of like who can call themselves a musician confidently. 'Cause like that's a circle that it's kind of hard for me to step into sometimes, feeling like very solidly a musician. So if I can do anything to make a kid or a teenager feel like music is part of my life in a meaningful way and in a permanent way, a therapeutic way, in an expressive way, that's what I'm after, I think, more than anything, is to just make music part of the lives of everyone around me, I guess, who's willing to accept it.
Yeah, I love that you speak on this kind of imposter syndrome. I think it's something a lot of people feel, and I'm sure it's helpful. I know it's helpful for me, for somebody as clearly talented and competent as you are, to know that you're going through that. So a big help to all those artists out there. So just one more question. This is kind of tapping back into the last song you sang, but if you just speak a little bit about Nowhere.
Yeah, so that song I wrote that I think in April or so this year, where, I was living in Portland at that time, spent a lot of time sitting on the porch, just watching the cars go by, because there's nothing else to do. And I guess it just is mostly about boredom, and how boredom is so closely linked with just like sadness and angst, and just invites you to feel all the worst feelings in the world. But then you have friends and you have people around you to remind you that it's okay, because we're kind of in this little pointless journey, but we're together. We're next to each other at least, and we can laugh about it. We can just pass the time as best we know how, which is mostly just, I don't know, sitting around and smoking cigarettes mostly. But
Lovely. That's a great note to go out on. Thanks so much for being on the show, and we wish you all the best.
Thanks again for having me.
Of course. That was singer-songwriter Emma Page. Next up, a reading and interview with Penny Geisinger. But before that, let's take a quick break to hear from our quote-unquote sponsors.
In the heart of Down East, Maine, there's a little-known but much-loved shop a shop that combines the down-home goodness of well-made food and the quaint treasures of a bygone era. It's Francine's Food Antiques. This well-kept Washington County secret boasts a trove of foods both ancient and rare. Young and old alike are sure to enjoy our expansive collection. Come see such highlights as FDR's half-eaten blueberry scone, the potato rumored to have helped win the Battle of Bunker Hill, and, of course, W.E.B. Du Bois' famous pickled okra. Traveling? Relax. Delivery is available throughout the U.S. and abroad, and you can rest assured that your purchase is being handled with the utmost care by our team of PhD-holding antique food experts. Feeling peckish after viewing our collection? Then stop by Francine's Food Antiques all-you-can-eat buffet. But don't worry, here the food is fresh and the staff is eager to serve. So next time you're down east, don't get caught up with the same old things. Come see our old things at Francine's Food Antiques.
Are you sick to death of bland, flavorless ice creams? Fed up with vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry? Bored with blueberry-based dairy treats? Well then, have I got news for you? The good folks at Landry's Ice Cream Emporium have a concoction that's sure to get your taste buds tingling. Yes, it's Landry's lobster-flavored ice cream bars, with real chunks of Maine lobster in each bite. Landry's patented lobster juicing process ensures that each delicious bar of premium ice cream is saturated with rich lobstery goodness. But that's not all. Now, in every package of Landry's lobster-flavored ice cream bars, you'll be delighted to find a side of butter and lemon at no cost to you. It may seem too good to be true, but it's simply a part of the Landry family's long tradition of passing savings on to their prized customers, the good people of Maine. So don't wait, don't hesitate. Get in your car and go straight to purchase yourself a box of Landry's lobster flavor ice cream bars, found in the freezer aisle next to Landry's scallop sorbet. Landry's ice cream, it sure is ice cream.
The following message is brought to you by Washington County Council of Mermaids.
Hi, I'm Amy McFinn. I'm a mother, an educator, a mermaid, and I'm running to represent you in the Maine State Senate. I'm ready to fight for you, your family, and all my constituents. From my plan to flood the entirety of the county to my luring sailors onto rocks initiative, I'm the only candidate with the underwater know-how to get things done. My opponents say I'm not even qualified to walk on land. Well, I might not be some big-shot politician with legs and feet, but I do know one thing. A vote for Amy McFinn is a vote to represent all the constituents of District 6, not just the landlubbers. From my head down to my tail, I'm 100% Maine, and I'm 100% dependable. Amy McFinn, one politician who isn't all wet.
Next, I sat down with Penny Geisinger. Penny is the author of the memoir Postcards from Here, a Maine Literary Award winner and a 3-time notable in Best American Essays. Her work has appeared in literary magazines, anthologies, and other places. The founding organizer of Iota, Short Prose Conference, she is a graduate of the Stone Coast MFA program. She can be found at www.pennygeisinger.com and at Penny Geisinger. Before our interview, she reads from The Sound of Galton's Whistle, a piece of creative nonfiction which appeared as the Sunday Rumpus essay in 2015. The essay won a Maine Literary Award, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize, and was a notable in Best American Essays that year.
When my dogs disappeared, I called the first psychic at the urging of a neighbor. I cringe now at the need to refer to Cassie as the first psychic, for it forces me to reveal that she was not the last. I had no history in believing in psychics. I had never spoken to a psychic. I had long regarded them as con artists living out lives at the other end of 1-900 numbers, preying on people's gullibility. But there is a thing that we say about desperate times and what they call for. I emailed Cassie first. She wrote back immediately that she was just coming in her door after a motorcycle ride, but that she was already getting a mental picture of my dogs. My relationship with Cassie and her psychic business partner, Rita, evolved over the next several months. We talked on the phone, we emailed, they gave me directions. Go stand by your front door, look north, go that way, your dogs are that way. And so I did that. I went north, I knocked on every door north of my front steps. I did not find them. They said, try to reach out to your dogs in your mind, try to visualize them, they will hear you. I soaked in a hot bath for hours in a bathroom lit only by candles. I played soft music. I got quiet inside. I called out through my heart to the universe. I called to the dogs. I reached out. I visualized. Nothing happened. There was no scratching at the door. My dogs, Hazel and Daisy, remained at large somewhere out in the woods, in whatever place they had fled to the morning that they had run away. I imagined them out there, merely turned around and lost, trying to find their way home. The morning that they disappeared didn't seem unusual at the time. They were in the yard while I got ready for work and did not come when I called them. I went outside, dropped my laptop and purse into the passenger seat of my car, and went to look for them in the field behind our house. I saw them there, poised at the edge of the woods. I shouted, "Stay!" as Daisy disappeared into the trees. Hazel turned at the sound of my voice, then faced the woods again. Something was out there in the forest, something compelling. She paused for only a second as I shouted her name. "Hazel, stay!" One leap, and she was gone. They did this when they felt like it, running off to chase rodents or deer. They always came back when they felt like it. Their disobedience made me furious that morning, and I left for work assuming that I would return home to find them pressed against the back door, tongues hanging. But that's not what happened. Several weeks into the search, a friend suggested another psychic, Kaimora, and her student, Sandra. I talked to Kaimora on the phone, and once she and I went out and drove around. I do not live in the Maine of postcards and scenic calendars. I live in Washington County, which backs itself into the easternmost point of land in the US and shares more in common with the wildest parts of New Brunswick than it does with Portland or Bangor. This is the Maine of scrubby blueberry barrens, monstrous 20-foot tides that swallow acres of beach, then spit them back out again over and over every day, and hardworking, hard-living families in hard-scrabble homes tucked into pockets of forest at the ends of dirt roads. Kaimora and I slowly cruised along many of those dirt roads, peering down long driveways, following her urges to look more closely at this house or that. Sandra came along too, heads leaning towards each other in the front seat. They conferred about what they were feeling. Kaimora spotted a husky tied to a doghouse in a neighbor's yard. She exclaimed when she saw it, "Is that your dog?" As if I would have needed a psychic if my dog was in plain sight. As if it could be that easy. Years later, I saw Sandra at the grocery store, and she told me that Kaimora had died unexpectedly. She had been elderly but healthy, and her death had come as a shock. Sandra had given up the psychic business. She had lost faith in her mentor. I asked how that happened. "She didn't find your dogs. I had to wonder." In the weeks right after my dogs ran away, Rita and Cassie continued to offer advice over the phone. Upon hearing that I had talked to Kaimora, they said, "Stop trying so hard. You're looking in too many places." Finally, Rita told me that I was scattering my energies too widely. Your dogs aren't coming back because you're not focused. I hung up on her. When the dogs had been missing for 2 months, my mom found one more psychic 3 hours downstate. She lived above a drugstore in downtown Skowhegan in an apartment decorated with scarves and psychedelic posters. She had long black hair and wore her nails as long as her dangly earrings. We sat around a small kitchen table and watched her randomly draw lines and circles on a map of Maine. The map was flat on the table in front of all three of us. We held down its corners as it tried to fold and curl back up. In an apparent trance, she circled letters on the map and drew lines between the circles. She became convinced that my dogs were either in Blue Hill or Columbia Falls. Both towns were hours from my home. She was the only psychic who ever asked to be paid. My mom gave her $100, and I dutifully hung posters in convenience stores and banks in both towns and went door to door handing out flyers. I waited for weeks, but this process yielded no dogs. I wasn't used to problems that were bigger than any solutions I had at hand. Daunted, but certain that I could find them if I just looked a little harder, I kept going. I didn't know it, but as I was running around, talking to psychics, looking for my dogs, that there were hard lessons ahead. My boyfriend, John, who ultimately became my husband back in the days before he was my ex-husband, and I searched in all the conventional ways as well. We hung posters, we walked trails, we drove miles beyond measure down back roads, main roads, and winding dirt logging roads. We developed a method of covering the miles. We would drive to a road that hadn't been searched yet, and he would get out of the car and start walking down the shoulder, calling for the dogs, whistling, clapping, calling their names. I would drive on farther, then pull over, leave the keys in the ignition, and start walking in the same direction, whistling, clapping, and calling their names. When he reached the spot where the car was parked, he would get in it, drive past me, pull over and park, and resume his walking and calling. We leapfrogged down countless miles using this method. One afternoon, I walked along the gravel shoulder of County Ridge Road. It was July, humid, and one unceasing horsefly dumbly buzzed my head. I called for my dogs, shouted their names into the empty woods, and whistled. My voice, my sharp whistling, didn't seem to penetrate the forest at all. It seemed to hang up on thick barricade of Maine pine, all branches and needles. The trees were scraggly. White moss hung like untrimmed facial hair from dead branches. Those acres of wild were not about to cough up what was missing, no matter how much I clapped and whistled. It was as if I was using a silent dog whistle, a Galton's whistle, and nobody was there who could hear it. The beseeching behind the sound was beyond human hearing, too, beyond my own ears. The sun was noon high. Both sides of the road were walled in by ancient pine growth, but the trees cast no shadows. I adjusted my hat, trying to maximize shade falling from underneath the brim, trying to get it to fall across my face. John's car rode slowly past with the windows down. Our eyes met, but we didn't say anything. I called some more for the dogs and kept whistling. A few hundred yards ahead, he pulled his car over, shut the engine off, and got out. He walked on the shoulder, heading the same direction I was walking, and I heard him calling, heard him whistling and clapping. His sounds rolled out through the woods, then came back in echoes. I worried that no dogs could hear us and that this was a whistle that only we could hear. This is the summer that turned into the year that turned into the 2 years that I spent looking for my dogs. This is also the summer that I got married and that turned into the year I conceived and lost my first baby in a miscarriage. This is the summer that, by all reasonable measures, I lost my mind along with my dogs and my baby. I stayed crazy for years. The crazy, high-pitched, and all-consuming at first became something that rose and fell in cycles. I grew up believing that I could solve any problem if I was willing to sit on hold and ask for the manager's supervisor. Someone always had the authority to fix it. I knew that non-refundable airline tickets were refundable if you said the right thing to the right person. I knew that laws could be rewritten if they were unjust. I knew that to change anything, you merely had to show up, and if you showed up fully enough, you could fix it. You just had to ask the right person or apply force at the right place. That's why I spent weeks sleeping in the living room so I could hear the dogs if they came to the door. I printed posters and hung them, not just in our town, but throughout the county. I found an online list of statewide animal shelters and sent them all an email with pictures of the dogs attached. I called everyone I could think of, game wardens, animal control officers, veterinarians. Nobody had the answer. Nobody had my dogs. Nobody heard my whistle. This summer's losses were the events that grabbed me by my shirt collar and shoved my back up against this single truth. Not even the manager's supervisor's supervisor can fix everything.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Penny. I was really struck in hearing you read. Not all writers do service to their work when they read, because they are, I think, two separate skills, but you have both. So what a pleasure to have you read that.
Well, thank you. That's so nice.
No, it's the truth. And we'll jump into some questions. I think the first is just about this piece and the way that it moves around. It's not really necessarily linear, and there's sort of almost a fragmentation or something that does remind, at least me, when I read it for the first time, of kind of a remembering. And I wonder about, is that something that you decide to do? Is it something that happens as you're writing? I'm just interested in your process with this piece.
So it's such an interesting question. Most of my work works like that, where kind of threads are braided together in some way, and they're related to each other, and they can fragmented is a word I use a lot, and I don't know how to do it any other way. I have really tried at times to just write a thing that goes from, Monday through Friday in order, straight up narrative, A to B to C, and I can't do it. Just can't do it. So, and it can feel like a weakness. I've had to really embrace it, but yeah, they all seem to come together like this, and I think the thing you just said, this is how memories work. I think that's a big part of it, is memories aren't linear. And so the stories don't tend to be, when I write them, linear either.
Yeah, well, I find it just very effective, and without really diving into it, it just, so much of the piece surprised me and affected me in such a real way. And so the way that it culminated was just special, and it's not something that I see done that often. So I just wanted to hear about that. But it's interesting that it's just it's really your voice and how you write. So that's a cool insight. I wanted to ask, I was reading an interview that you did, I think in 2016. I can't remember the exact year, but you talk about writing essays, personal essays, creative nonfiction, however you want to define that. And you just they ask you a little bit about kind of the boundaries around that, and you had a really interesting answer about what you do and what you don't write about, and you framed it as deciding what's sacred to you and what's sacred in your life. And I'm just wondering about how if you're thinking about that has changed at all, or how you think about writing in a personal way now.
Wow, when did I say that? That's so interesting. You'll have to point me to that interview. I don't remember saying that, but it sounds really smart. So I'm glad that's a thing that came out of my mouth. So yeah, that's a really interesting question. I feel like I am not a private person. Clearly, because this thing I just read is on the internet, and it gets much more personal after the segment that I read. I feel like my experiences as a person are not so special or unique. Other people have already experienced them, even if the details of whatever our plots are as people, if they're not the same. The story behind them, the human experience that we have, is what's behind all these series of events that I write about. So I don't feel precious about much. I do have kids, and so and my kids are now teenagers. And when they were little, I wrote about them a lot, and because our stories are so the same when they're little. Now that they're bigger, I'm not writing about them anymore. Well, I am, but I'm not publishing about them anymore. Because now their stories are kind of becoming more their own stories, and it feels a little like kind of co-opting something that's not mine. So that's a boundary.
Interesting. Just thinking about your work more generally, I've been working my way through postcards from here, and I did want to get this in here because there's this line from one of the pieces, Tourist Town, I think is the title, and there's a line in there that I think has probably endeared you to many around here, which is people from New York and Massachusetts they are never quite happy. Of course, that's out of context, but I just thought that was quite a choice sentiment. I know you were originally from Colorado, right? And your folks moved out here, kind of back to the land movement, and then you were in New York City and New York State for college, and then you ended up back in Maine, back in Washington County. And I'm just wondering, as much as that collection seems like, you know, really personal, it also seems like a lot about the rhythms of living in this place. And I'm just wondering about, the process there.
Yeah, so I love where I live. I feel really lucky to live here, and to be able to make a living here. And I, as you say, I am and always will be from away. Even though I did go to grade school here, and then we left, and then I came back. I left and lived other places, and was a young adult, and said things like, I will never want to live in that place again because there is nothing there. And then I got a little older and got over myself, and realized there's a lot here. And I remembered being a kid here, and came back here when I wanted to start a family, because this is such a great place to be a kid. So I feel really lucky to be raising my kids here. Postcards from here. So here in the title is all sorts of places. Here is this part of Maine. Here is also just in my house. Here is in my family. Here in my head. It's sort of each piece is from some place that is here. So it is personal, and you're right, it is also to capture some aspects of life here, some wonderful aspects of life here. When a publisher decided to publish it, and we were in conversation about the cover, at the beginning of that conversation, I laid out 2 rules. I was like, no lobsters and no lighthouses on this book.
Thank you for doing that.
That is not what I'm here to talk about. So, and she is not even in America, so she didn't really know what I was talking about. But
because you bring up, I didn't have this on my list of questions, but because you do bring up the cover, it's a photo. There's a dog on the roof. Somebody's got a ladder going up. What's the source for that, or why that photo?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So my dad is a photographer, and he has a series of photos like that that are just they're just witty. They're full of wit. And I wanted one of those photos for the cover. So I assembled a few, I sent them to the publisher. We settled on that one because both liked it. But I feel like the story is that I'm the dog on the roof. I'm on the roof. I don't know how I got there. The wrong rescue has arrived. I can't climb down on a ladder, and I don't know what to do. So I feel like that's really kind of who I am, is the dog on the roof.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. On the cover, it does say a memoir in vignettes, and I don't know if you even want to classify what these are, but they are quite short. And of course, some of the essay work you do is longer, like the one that you were just reading. And I guess I just wonder, what's the relationship between those things for you, and do you approach them in a different way?
So I do approach them in a totally different way, and it depends on what the material is that I'm working with. Like you take a piece out of postcards, like the one that you mentioned. I think that's Tourist Town, and is about just seeing this moment in a busy summer restaurant. That's the moment I wanted to capture, and there's just not a longer piece there. So those pieces are really about capturing very small, intimate moments and kind of exploding them. Whereas the longer pieces, like the one I read from, there's so much. It's a much bigger story. It really is. I guess it's really driven by what it is I've come to say, what I've come to talk about. And when I want to talk about a bigger thing, like this piece, the one I just called the dog piece. They all have nicknames. This is the dog piece. It needed more space. The shorter pieces started when I was in my MFA program, and I had a friend who was traveling one of our semesters, and we were sharing a mentor, and I asked our mentor how my friend was doing, and she said, "Oh, he's really good. He's just sending me postcards." And I didn't know what he was writing, but I knew immediately what I wanted to write. So I started that collection.
It's interesting you bring up your MFA, because I think that also has a lot to do with the next question I'm going to ask you, which is about Iota, the Conference for Short Prose, which is a conference that you founded. And I want you to talk about it more generally, but I had a specific question about it, which was that there's a mixed genre format, but it wasn't always that way. I think in the first 2 years there were genre definitions. So I'm just wondering about kind of how and why those went away, and if you want to talk about the conference more generally, that's great. But yeah, just to pose that question to you.
Yeah, it's such a good question. So I had never run a conference before. Here's like the dirty secret is I've never actually been to a conference like that, small writing conference. But I created one because I wanted to keep some community alive around me. So I knew that my school program would be ending and that I really would miss that environment. So I wanted to create something like that for myself, also for other people, also for this area. And the first few years, you're right, first of all, I always talk about Iota in first person plural. There's no we. I don't know why I do that. We, Iota, we at Iota. It started, it was just a marketing. I didn't know how else to market it. And most conferences are marketed that way with the fiction, poetry, creative nonfiction. And so I did that, but it never felt like the right fit for what I wanted it to be. And it was after the first couple of years that I got brave enough to run the conference that I really wanted to run, which was short prose. And people could define that however they want. My book, Postcards, people have referred to them as prose poems, micro essays. I don't know what they are. I don't really care actually what they are called. Vignettes, that's what the publisher publishes. She published collections of vignettes. So, okay, it's a collection of vignettes. That's fine. I don't care. Those decisions of what to call the thing are not interesting to me. But we have to call them something. So we use this mishmash of terms. So the conference really drew on that idea that the boundaries between forms are kind of imaginary.
Finally, before we say goodbye, I just want to ask, do you have anything that you want to let people know about that's coming up, or anything that I haven't asked you that you want to get a word in edgewise?
No, well, I think, first of all, I do want to say that Iota is on a hiatus. I feel like it's important to be upfront about that since it came up. We're potentially bringing Iota back. I don't know who we is, but Iota may come back. I'll have some help, but probably not this year. And I am working on another book, which is called Shift, and it's another memoir. And it's this, at the beginning of the book, I am straight and married. And by the end of the book, I am, neither of those things are true, but I do get married again. So it's the story of that transition in my life from straight to not so straight. And it's in kind of a final stage of revision. There's there's an agent involved now, which is new and exciting. And I don't know when it might be out, but it's exciting to have my head in it and have a project advancing. It's also a collection of shorts. I tried to write it as just like what I call a normal narrative, and I failed. So it's a collection, longer pieces than postcards, but still a collection.
Yeah, well, we'll be glad for that, and certainly keep an eye out. So, I thanks again so much for reading, for coming on, answering my questions, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
That was Penny Geisinger. And now we're going to hear a poem from Lora Whelan entitled Out at Sumac. Lora is a writer and painter who lives in Eastport, Maine with her husband and 2 cats. She is the assistant editor and publisher of the regional newspaper The Quoddy Tides and is a member of the Eastport Gallery Cooperative.
Out at Sumac. Oh, they're out there, climbing on the rocks at Sumac Island, a neighbor once said. And that was all that was needed for the 2 Sioux to be anchored and defined. A myth of sorts to explain the roaring wind, the fading red sun, the ripping waves. They're out there now, scarves whipping and blinding their eyes. The wind drives the bay, reckless, almost raging. The sun is low, red evanescence. 1 more hour till dusk with rain clouds rolling dark rays. It looks like it's racing the waves, little Sue says to Big, her mother. But the wind takes the words and flings, like a mashed up music score, and somewhere far away, the words are heard, a flapping cormorant wing. The 2, neither young, keep scrambling round the bend, making for Sumac, with the tide far out. They jump or hop, each alone, the dribbling outlet that twice a day slices aside gravity and balance with an austerity the Sioux know in their bones. Big Sue has a point-tipped cane, like the handle to a star befitting her age. One of those hiking things, telescoping metal in iridescent colors. She stabs it into a slop of seaweed sprawled between stones. Where's the bottom to set her foot without crashing down? The mare's spread of her toes telling her with insistent tones that the miraculous upright may spin off its load. The Sioux stop and gaze. The waves, they slap and roll at Goose, at Spectacle, at Sumac, at Matthews. There the Sioux point at the sandbars bared by the ripping of the wind. The sand ripples and spreads like canvas and thread, and when the tide is neap, sows a path between dots where people, like little Sue's grandma back in their day, would walk and collect gull eggs for food. Big Sue prods her walking stick, says something little Sue can't hear but knows, reaches down, breaks off small bits. Goose tongue, salty and sweet with that satisfying crunch, a bit of ocean kept in check until they bite and make it their own. The eagle swings by, the wind tipping its feathers. It adjusts, stares down. So many thousands of years move below its wings. It knows them as links in a continuous, ruinous chain. Big Sue heaves a sigh. Came out of nowhere that big gust of eagle sadness from deep in her lungs. Her daughter gives her arm a rub. They turn, ready to return, and wait as the seagulls come home for the night. The chatter and squawks and squeals as they soar and careen and land with hops and leaps and minor staggers. Even against the roar of the wind, the waves, the trees, the gulls make themselves heard. And then the adolescents, preening and showing off, racing the wind, get tail lifted, turn unexpected somersaults, wobble with corrections before landing to what might be gull laughter. And the 2 Sioux smile, reminded of days long ago, teetering in fancy dress and heels. Big Sue follows little Sue, heading home. the goose tongue salty on their lips, the red sun following their trail, the wind standing back and whistling in the wings as they walk across the drained basin, on the path threaded through private land, along the sandy barren road, where the utility lines sing and moan, past the boatyard where the mast lines clang, and into Moose Island proper where they go their separate ways, until the crows call them back to morning.
Well, that just about wraps it up. Thank you to Emma Page and Penny Geisinger for coming on the show. Thanks to Lora Whelan for reading her poem Out at Sumac. Ric Craig, Brian Schuth, Jenie Smith, and Kim Vogel read our ads and news bulletins, which were written by your host, Mark Macy. Moose Island Mischief is edited by Mark Macy and produced by the Eastport Art Center. Visit us on the web at eastportartcenter.org. And remember, if you're ever wicked far down east, come and see us. Oh, and you'll want to stick around after the credits for the local news. Bon voyage.
So, I'm Perry Peepers, and this is the porch side report. So, your exclusive source for what I've seen from my porch today. Everything right here from just being on my porch. So let's start. Today, let's see, I saw 3 deer wander by. Just wander right by the porch, sitting right here on my porch and looking out to the side there, and 3 deer just wandered by. I promptly shoot them away. Let's see. Okay, so I also saw a punk kid on a skateboard. He was listening to a song that had, pretty explicit lyrical content. You could hear it from the porch. It was, it pretty explicit. It would have been a licking for me if I'd ever done the like, that's for sure. It was very, very explicit, very. So that punk kid. And I could see him right from the side of my porch. I mean, right looking over to the side. What else? Well, I saw Gail and Gilbert. Gail and Gilbert and Daphne and Doug. Yes, they all stopped by. They were going out on a walk. That was after the punk kid with the skateboard. That was after that. So they wouldn't have heard any of that explicit lyrical content because it was after. Let's see, anything else? Well, while they were here, we were talking about the weather and how it's turning cold and, that stuff, all that stuff right here on the porch, just talking off to the side with them. What else? They recommended a new type of coffee creamer for me and the missus. And, then they went on their way. Yep. They left the porch area. Let's see. Well, anyway, I guess that's about it. You got your deer and you got your kid on a skateboard and you got all those people to stop by, and so that was a busy day here on the porch. That's it. I guess I'll go get supper started. So again, this is Perry Peepers, and this is my porch side report, exclusive. Thank you.